In the winter of 1781, in the vast open waters of the Atlantic Ocean, a slave ship named the Zong committed one of the most horrifying crimes in maritime history, a crime so brutal, so cold, that it shocked the world, not because hundreds of people were murdered, but because their killers called it a business decision. This is the story of the Zong Massacre. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Hidden Pages. The 18th century was the peak of the transatlantic slave trade. Europe's wealth was built on African bodies, and Britain was at the center of this vast, violent machine. Enslaved Africans were legally considered property, listed alongside sugar, rum, and gold. They were cargo, not human beings. And it was in this world that the slave ship Zong began its fateful journey. The Zong was originally a Dutch vessel captured during wartime and bought by a British slave trading company, Gregson and Company. In August 1781, the ship left the coast of West Africa with over 440 enslaved Africans packed into a space built for half that number, a small crew of barely 20 men, a captain with almost no navigational experience. From the very beginning, the voyage was doomed. As the Zong crossed the Atlantic, sickness spread. Starvation, heat, and disease killed dozens. But the true disaster happened when Captain Luke Collingwood made a catastrophic error. He sailed past Jamaica, the ship's destination, by several days. This mistake pushed the voyage far beyond its limits. Water supplies ran dangerously low. Panic spread among the crew. And here, greed took over. Under maritime insurance law at the time, there was a cruel technicality. If enslaved Africans died of disease, the owners received nothing. But if the cargo was jettisoned, thrown overboard to save the ship, insurance would pay for every lost piece of property. The captain and crew met. They made a decision. They would throw Africans overboard, alive, and claim the insurance money. This was not desperation. This was profit. Between November 29th and December 1st, 1781, the slaughter began. Groups of enslaved Africans, men, women, children, were dragged from the dark hold of the ship. They screamed, they resisted, they begged for their lives. But one by one, the crew hurled them into the endless Atlantic. 132 people were murdered, some in chains, some clutching each other, some choosing to leap themselves, choosing the sea over slavery. The ocean swallowed them, and the Zong continued on. Days later, rain began to fall, filling the ship's barrels with fresh water, enough water to have saved every life. The murders were never necessary. They were never justified. They were never anything but cold-blooded mass killing. When the Zong reached Jamaica, the owners of the ship did something unthinkable. They filed an insurance claim for the murdered Africans. They argued that throwing them overboard was an act to preserve the ship and the remaining cargo. In 1783, the case came before a London court. Shockingly, the judges treated it not as mass murder, but as a shipping dispute. The first ruling even sided with the slave traders. But then something changed. The news of the massacre reached Granville sharp. A passionate abolitionist, he insisted the killings were nothing short of murder. Olaudah Equiano, a formerly enslaved African author, carried the story to activists across London. Outrage spread. Pamphlets circulated. Public debates erupted. The horror of the Zong became a rallying cry. A second trial overturned the insurance claim. Not because the victims were human beings, but because the crew had mismanaged water supplies. Still, no one was ever tried for murder. Yet the Zong ignited a fire the world could not ignore. The Zong Massacre became one of the strongest pieces of evidence used by abolitionists in Britain. It was cited again and again in speeches, petitions, and protests, and it helped set in motion the abolition of the British slave trade in 1807, and eventually the abolition of slavery across the empire in 1833. Though justice was never given to the victims, their deaths helped change the course of history. The story of the Zong is a reminder, not just of the cruelty of the slave trade, but of how systems can turn human lives into numbers, into property, into profit. And yet, it is also a reminder of resistance, of activism, and of the power of truth. 132 lives were thrown into the sea, but their story continues to echo across centuries, demanding that the world never forget, fade to black.